Robert Johnson. I have been wanting to talk to you for a long time. Now, quick note. Robert Johnson was my roommate for the longest time before he went and moved to California. Now, that's a whole story in itself, but I want to start at the beginning because I love stories. And you've got a story, Robert. Now, I told you earlier that I wanted to start at Chick-fil-A. And that's some years back. That's towards your high school years, right?
Yeah. So when I was in high school, basically my parents couldn't really afford to like pay for my clothes, buy me, like pay for my car. You know, like all these parents would buy them like a car, pay for their car insurance, the gas that goes along with it, the registration fees, like their phone bill, everything. And my parents just couldn't afford any of that. So I basically started working at Chick-fil-A in the Perimeter Mall in Atlanta. And I worked like 40 hours a week, and the school would be like, hey, you can't work that much, you know, like it's like borderline illegal. And so when I would work at Chick-fil-A, I would hit like a 40-hour mark, and keep in mind, Chick-fil-A is only 6 days a week. So I would work 40 hours in 6 days and go to high school full time. And so I would clock out at like 39 hours, and then they're like, all right, here's $40 cash, like don't worry about it.
That's funny, man. So hey, just under the table. Hey, it didn't happen, right, Robert? It didn't happen. Hey, you did what you had to do, though, didn't you? Now that is the cool thing, though, man, because a lot of people don't understand the hard work that goes into existing. And you didn't have that. You didn't have that like that family in the background that could financially support you like some other people. And a lot of other people, Robert, it's a fascinating thing. A lot of other people will say like, oh, like woe is me. That's the thing in our generation. It's like, oh, I didn't have this support. I didn't have it. I don't know what I'm going to do. But you're like, I'm going to make this work. I'm going to make this work, and I'm going to succeed. And here's the cool thing, man. You went on from there. And in fact, I think, what was it next? The Navy, right? Wasn't the Navy?
So I was in high school, and I enlisted in the Navy, and I became a corpsman, which a lot of people don't know. Like, oh, we go with the Marines or with the infantry, right? So I go to MEPS, right? And I had this culinary arts teacher, and I enlisted in the Navy, and I'll never forget. She's like, gave me a 0 because I wasn't there that day, and I didn't email her that I was going to be there because she wanted us to email her like, oh, the day you're not going to be there, I want you to email me like the day of. Well, I couldn't do that because when you go to MEPS, they take your phone. And then I had class, and I sent her an email, and she never responded. So going the next day, she gave me a 0 on a test. And she said, and she kind of tried to make fun of me in front of the whole class. She was like, oh, you joined the Navy because you weren't tough enough to be a Marine. But I mean, looking back now, like even though that was like a small gesture, like that really like kind of stuck with me, and I don't know, ultimately made me a better corpsman.
Well, the fascinating thing is, Robert, you talk about being a corpsman and everything, and you weren't strong enough to be a Marine, right? But here's the cool thing, man, because I'm in the same community as you. I know that you're like right there with us, man. You were right there with the Marine Corps, not only just the Marine Corps, man. You were with the boys. Can you talk a little bit about your journey through the Navy, and then how that progressed to the community, man? And you know exactly what community I'm talking about.
Yeah. So I enlisted in the Navy. So I enlisted March 3rd, 2014. Left for boot camp. September 23rd, 2014. And my first duty station, right, was it's kind of a long story, but my first duty station was Naval Hospital Camp Lejeune. It's now Naval Medical Center. Kudos to them, moving up, going from a hospital to a medical center. It's a big deal in BMed. And when I got there, when I was in course school, right, they give you orders, so like when you're finishing your training, you get orders to like where you're gonna go, right? And they came out and they were like, hey, your orders got, cut and modified, and then they're now disbanded, so you have to get new orders. And I'm like, well, dude, I'm supposed to graduate in like 3 days and leave this place, It's like, where do you want to go? I was like, oh, 1st Marine Division, 2nd Marine, with the infantry, And then they came back and they're like, all right, you're still going to Naval Medical Center. And I always, think like, oh, like, why did I get that? And then it wasn't, the first day I checked in, I'm an E1, like I'm there's 30 feet of crap, and then there's me, you know. And I checked into, I got looked out, you know. They kind of just give you where you're gonna work, and I got orders to work in like a surgical unit as a teenager, you know, which was just phenomenal for me and my growth and everything. And I ended up running into a Master Chief who was a SARC, and he.
Yo, now hold on.
Yeah.
Explain to folks real quick, and you can look at the cameraman. So you know your camera's over here. Explain to folks real quick, what is a SARC?
So a SARC is you know, it's Special Amphibious Reconnaissance Corpsman. It's the corpsmen who go with you know, Marine Recon, MARSOC, EOD teams, Naval Special Warfare, across all special operation units. They are some of the best like medics and corpsmen like in the entire Department of Defense. You know, it's kind of like a unspoken silent professional of military medicine.
Well, that's dope. All right. Okay. So now we know what a SARC is, because you know a lot of people, man. These military and God, what is it?
Acronyms.
Acronyms. Yeah, acronyms. You know, people will see these acronyms and be like, "Ooh, what's a SARC?" You know. Okay. So now continue. You met this Master Chief.
Yeah. So I go up to him and like when you walk around the military, people are always wearing like different pins and stuff, and when you first get there, you don't know what they mean, you know. And so I see this dude, you know, he's like 6 foot, just jacked, like Abercrombie and Fitch model looking guy, and you know, just super, just happy, awesome, calm guy. And he's like got this like gold dive bubble and jump wings, and I'm like looking around, like, what is that? You know what I mean? Like I see like, you know, little boat pins and like air, you know, warfare and like all these other weird things. I'm like, what the frick are you doing with gold jump wings? Like what? You know, in a gold dive bubble, like, oh, what is that? Oh, were you with the Marines? Like, was that FMF, you know, the typical corpsman, you know? And he's like, no, man, I was a SARC, you know, I was with Desert Storm. I was in Fallujah twice. And I was like, oh my God. Which Fallujah, you know, as you know, is like the bloodiest battle of Marine Corps history in modern era and OEF, you know. We actually had to go in there twice. And so it was a big deal. It's probably one of the, it's a legit operation. And so he's like, yeah, if you want to do that, then meet me at the gym at 6 a.m. tomorrow morning, and let me see what you're about. And when I got there, you know, I wasn't even tough enough to do a pull-up, and I was just throwing up, you know, the whole way. And like, it's like they had these little bars, and you like have to like push down and jump over. And I'm so weak, dude. Like I couldn't even do a pull-up. I would just kind of crawl over land and throw up. And as I'm throwing up, I'm like reaching to climb back up the next bar, you know. And he looked at me and he was like, you know, and he's just like, that's what I'm talking about, you know. Like I'm not looking for physical. I'm not looking for, you know, how smart you are, how fast you are, how good you are. I'm just looking for effort, you know. And then I kept training with him for 2 years, just for the chance, the opportunity to finally go and do that.
Now, you know, you say go do that. Now I wanna talk about that in particular. Now I could sit here, Robert, and I could stare at the camera and I say, okay, this is BRC. This is the basic reconnaissance course, because this is where me and Robert we kind of come together here, not necessarily in terms of knowing each other, but in terms of understanding one another. But you know, Robert, I want you to detail to people about your personal BRC experience, because every basic reconnaissance course experience is personal, and boy, you had a heck of an experience. Can you give us a brief experience of that?
Yeah. So I was in. So you start out prep, right? It's like 5 weeks, and it just sucks, right? It's like 3 days every day. You're doing ropes and climbing, and like the whole time I'm there, like I got to put it out there, I wasn't like the stellar guy, the top of the class. I was like 30 feet of crap. There's me, goon squad leader, getting messed up because you freaking forgot how to tie a simple knot, you know, and like everyone else is just outperforming me. And so if you weren't in that good performing group, you were like in kind of the crap list, and I was like the crap list leader in PRC. And so I went through prep. It was just like 5 weeks. I finished the first time. I mean, I remember like drowning like one time, and I'm like, dude, I got like 4 more months of this crap, you know? And it's like the 3rd day and I'm already like drowning in the pool, you know? Which the first time you drown, it's like you go to a place where like you really feel like you're not gonna be here anymore, you know? It's a really like hardcore experience that you have to like put yourself through, and then it's kind of like, all right, like I'm willing to die for this, you know? And so that's kind of where you have to be. And then so I get through BRPC, and then I go to BRC, and it was like a wild experience. Like I had like one of my really good friends ended up passing away in land nav. That was like just a really tough experience, you know, and BRC is already hard as it is, you know, and then when you have like close friends of yours pass away, it just, and you're like, you know, it just hits home, you know. But, and then you're like back in the surf zone, you know, and you're like, oh my God, like this is just like, it's just a mental sensory overload that you have to be willing to just like kind of push to the side and keep going. But I think like the ultimate thing is like, I got through the course the first time, and I got to the very end, you know, and a lot of people don't know, like you go through the death hike. It's like 12 miles of tear gas. You haven't been sleeping all week. You go on patrols, and I'm like I'm a machine gunner for my team, which is like a lot of people don't know. It's like if you were to think of like a soccer team, the machine gunner on the team's the goalkeeper. They're the one that are carrying heavy firepower. They're going to keep your team well, safe, and secure during, you know, multi-covert operations day in and day out. So, you know, when I'm holding security for my team in the middle of the night and I get caught sleeping, it's like the goalkeeper getting, you know, falling asleep during a soccer match. It's a really big deal in the military world. And so I immediately knew I probably failed patrols, but I still got to go through this next week and then go through the death hike, which is just like a horrible experience. And then I got done, and I think like, to sum it all up, like I'm getting ready to go on patrols, and they're making me the saw gunner. And the week prior, I had gone to the clinic to get my legs looked at, and they did x-rays, and they're like, hey, you have bilateral femur stress fractures, like, and you're about to carry like 180 pounds through the mountains over rocky terrain. You weigh 130 pounds. You make one wrong step, like your legs are gonna snap like in the mid shaft and could sever your femoral artery, you bleed out. And I'm just like, yo, dude, that's what these tourniquets are for. And you just throw them in your cargo pockets and you just, you know, step out, you know. And I got done, you know, and you know, I got through it, and it was just a horrible ride, you know, because they don't want to do paperwork, you know, because they know you failed. So it's much easier to do this person quit, you know. It's like, one form, but if someone makes it through, there's all this extra paperwork they have to do. So to make it easier on them, they're going to try to run you out. And I wasn't having it. And so, and they actually gave me the opportunity to go back day 1, phase 1, and do it all over again.
And you did it, man. And here's the thing, Robert. It's like, you know, you got to understand, you know, if I got presented with the opportunity, let's say the opportunity, right, to do BRC from day 1, phase 1, all over again, and I had made it to the death hike, I'm not saying I wouldn't have done it because I wanted it, right? But I'm saying the thought would have gone across my mind at least once, like, should I do this again? You know, really, do I want to put myself through this? I mean, I would have done it because, you know, I knew what I was going for. But like, to know what you were about to go through again, and then to go through it again, is saying something much about your character, and it's actually very thematic, and we're actually leading into something in terms of, as we depart from, for a spell, as we depart from your military profession, right? We're going to kind of start getting into what you were doing in terms of the medical collegiate profession, right? Because as time went on, you departed from the Navy, and this is where you and I actually physically became knowledgeable of each other's existence, which I actually think is a story in itself. If you want to go through that story briefly of how we met even. Send it, man.
Yeah, I don't think people understand like how small the recon community is. at one given time, like on active duty, there's only 1,000 of us that even exist. It's like a giant high school. Like everyone knows everybody, and if you don't know somebody, you know somebody who knows somebody, right? Even Spencer served with guys I went through school with that I'm good friends with. Like that's just how small it is. And he's like, yeah, I know this guy, and I'm like, oh yeah, I went through school, and and so we, it's just a giant high school. And I do have to apologize. I'm not very good at like speaking about myself, right? There is so much that happened at BRC. Like it is just, it's like a selection process. It just sucks, and so when you go through that, it's kind of like, the only way I can explain it is through like Einstein's theory of relativity, like what I know is the hardest thing that I've ever gone through, right? Whatever it is, there's someone else that's gone through something that's probably comparably not as hard, but for them, that's the hardest thing they've ever gone through. So you have to like kind of sit there and put yourself in that mindset. But when you go through that kind of school, everyone in their mind knows that that's the hardest thing that we've ever done in our lives. So it's a really close culture. And so if someone wears an insignia, so I guess like he had an insignia on his car that is easily recognizable for a guy who's gone through a course like that. And so when I saw this insignia on his car in college, I was like, one, why do you have that? But two, there's another dude walking around. Like I gotta meet this guy. And it's one of those communities where you go through something so difficult and you meet someone, it's like you instantly have known that person for a long time without even knowing them, because we've all gone through that same grueling, horrible process where you start with like 100 guys and you end with 30. Then you get through prep with 30, and then you take 2 of those classes of 30 guys, so you class up a BRC, and then you end up with like 60 dudes just even starting the course, and then you end with like 25 of those guys, so you total would start like 200 and end with like 20 or 30. So we've gone through something pretty significant, so it's a really great honor, to meet another dude who's gone that, because it's and even when we did meet, it's so rare that we didn't even believe that we were who we say we were until we started name dropping people. And when you go to course, you're fact checking people, because it's just, to us, it's too surreal to even have met someone that's done that before.
Yeah, man, it really was crazy, because I didn't even believe it. I was like, this dude left this note on my car and was like, hey, I'm such and such. I was with such and such. I went through BRC, at this date, like, give me a call. And I was like, there's no way a dude who I randomly moved to a random town to go to a random college and stayed at a random apartment just happens to be also another BRC graduate, basic reconnaissance course graduate, a reconnaissance individual, for that matter. So it was awesome. It was awesome meeting. Go ahead.
The other thing is I have to put that out there. Like I went to 18 Delta, and unfortunately, which is like the special operations medical course you go through. And like I was at the end of it. So like to become a SARC, you go through BRC, then you go through like this heinous medical school. Basically to become a civilian version of a PA, but in trauma medicine. And then you go to dive and then jump, right? And so in the Navy, you get awarded an NEC when you complete all of those trainings. You're like, then do you become a SARC, right? And so, there's all this political, bureaucratic things that we have checks and balances in place in the DoD for a reason. And so, when I was at the end of 18 Delta, or the Special Operations Medical Course in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, I was at the very end, and I was getting ready to graduate and finish up, and then it came out that my dive physical had got denied due to eyesight, so I just couldn't see far away, and you know what I mean. It's just kind of a weird thing that happened. Like, how does that, like who cares? Like I went through BRC twice. Like I can dive underwater. You know what I mean? I did so many brick treads, and I drowned 3 times. Like my eyesight has nothing to do with that, but unfortunately, at the end of the day, when you get denied a dive seat, right, like you can't continue on training because you're not technically awarded the new job till you complete all the kind of that checks in the box, so unfortunately I wasn't able to continue. But what was so good about it, It was probably the greatest thing that ever happened. Because when I was there, I'll never forget, I walked into a cadaver lab, and there's a guy named Chief Ammerman. And he used to be a 2nd Recon Chief back with my Master Chief who trained me, right? And brilliant individual. Brilliant. I think about some of the things he was talking about today about free radicals of acetaminophen and Tylenol and how it leads to increase in thermodynamics in the body that the hypothalamus can't control. Like, just amazingly complex things. I'll never forget him. And he brought me into the cadaver lab one day, specifically just me, and my heart rate went to 130 because I was just so in tune with what was going on. I like, it was like, you know what I mean, Willy Wonka in the Chocolate Factory getting the golden ticket, man. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And you just like, I go to that moment, you know, and I sit there and you see a cadaver just all dissected out, and you see like what makes us human and like how we're created, you know, and it's just like, there's just so complex and so much going on. It is absolutely fascinating.
Well, you know, Robert, it's so funny, man, because we're gonna kind of go into, I think, from here your collegiate stuff. Yeah. But it's so funny, man, because, you know, for me, that's like the fundamental component of my religiosity. It's like, you know, you were there to pursue, you know, special operations, you know, your SARC course, and you were experienced and you were exposed to this just amazing amount of information, because truly the SARC course, and particularly 18 Delta, is an amazing course that just exposes you to so much information in regard to medical stuff. And here you were presented with a situation, or maybe not 18 Delta, you might be able to correct me on that. But, you know, here you were, you know, exposed to all this, and then you weren't able to continue. We're like, well, okay, well, you know, I'll go to the collegiate route. No. And in the collegiate route, you were able to go forward with that medical knowledge. Not only forward, man, you were able to go, I mean, to amazing amounts. I remember you studying, and you weren't just studying, man. You were genuinely learning.
Yeah, so like that's the thing is like if you, so a lot of people, you know, it's the military, right? They're going to get what they put out of you, right? So if you were like, hey, I want to go to special operations and I want to become a special operations medic, right? When you graduate, like, you owe the Navy so many years because they spent so much time and money invested in you. But since I didn't graduate, I had like all this knowledge of an IDC that I'm not, you know, qualified to really use. And then I go into, you know, the academic world, and I get to, you know, and thank God for certain people that it just exists out there that even allowed me to pursue my dream to go to college. Because without them, you know, I just can't say their names, but amazing, you know what I mean? And what was so great, right, is like I learned all this medicine, and then when I start doing these pre-med prereqs, like students are now learning like what they're going to learn in medical school. But it's like I've learned, like, you know, I have knowledge of a, PA, you know, in the civilian terms. And then now I'm like relearning all of the things I should have known before. And then you're able to just truly see like how it's all correlated. And it's super fascinating.
Yeah, man, it really was. And, you know, I'll be honest with you, you know, me being, you know, living here with you and everything, and experiencing the amount of effort that this guy put into not only just, you know, learning, I should say, maybe understanding on a fundamental level, you know, the things that were being discussed in his class. And these aren't just, you know, classes of just, you know, BS, for lack of better terms. They were classes that pertain to the actual like medical biology of the human, the components, how they work on a fundamental level, you know, and understanding them on a fundamental level. It was a fascinating thing. But you know, Robert, you did exemplary through that. But I also want to bring up a quick story as well, because this brings us to where you're currently at, where you're currently going, and this was the beginning of the transition for that. I remember. And this is kind of hard to talk about. You know, I remember coming home and, you know, hearing on the news the things that were going on in Afghanistan. Yeah. And, you know, our community is small. It's a small community. Yeah. Sure. And, well, you know, let me set the stage here. And and I say we, myself and my other roommate were watching what was going on in Afghanistan. We knew that it was, Second Reconnaissance that was over there. We knew people affiliated with Second Reconnaissance was over there. And, I'm very cognizant, and you kind of belong to that Second Reconnaissance community for a while. And you walked through the door, and I was like, hey, man, have you heard about, what's going on in Afghanistan? And you were like, no, because you were so involved with your schoolwork. And I was like, bud, you need to sit down. Second, has kind of took a hit, and things are going on. Can you kind of talk us through that state?
Yeah, so it's like I think, to give anybody an idea, I was working in an inorganic synthesis research lab to do like nanoparticle technology for cellular cancer research, right? So obviously there's tons of organic chemistry involved. Organic is just like, if you go on Wikipedia and you're like, oh, what is acetaminophen? And you just see some weird molecule that's drawn out, that's organic chemistry. And, and in there you have fundamentals, right? And so I studied so much for this exam over the summer, doing research, like complex inorganic research, right? So organic, then you go to inorganic, and it's much more difficult. And yeah, I just straight up failed because I couldn't pay attention. But I mean, I think having friends over there and knowing people who don't come home and get wounded, and, and you're like, it just kind of hits you a little bit, why am I here? And they're not, and so then you I think hard too is trying to explain it to a college professor, and then be like, hey, can I get some grace? Can I get some time off? And they're like, no, and you're like, well, because they're like, I don't really know how to deal with that, and that's just kind of how it is, but I think what really set the stone was kind of going through that, and knowing hey, it could have been you could have been there. If you weren't here in college, you would have been there, and I think what's really great is you kind of look at life oh man, there's a really good chance if I would have stayed in the military, I would have been there, and so you kind of look at life like this, a second opportunity to continue on, and the efforts of those who aren't here anymore. And what's super, I mean, it's just a really melancholy kind of idea, but it's great to have that, because now you live life with no regrets. You're you know what I mean? And so, it's embarrassing, for me, because it's why, you know what I mean? That sucks, and these terrorists are just really evil people. But I think what you do is you just have to, I guess psychologically think yourself through the situation to continue whatever it is. So if you're, struggling with a combat related incident, I think what you do is you find it people know what I'm talking about, right? When you have friends killed in combat, it sucks, right? It's it's not like someone OD'd or, or all these other horrible things. For me, it just, because everyone's experience is different. For me, it just felt wrong and cruel, and it's blatantly murder. And then, but how you get through that is it rots you to your core, and you find your true reason in your life. Oh, I got this second opportunity. So you just find that true reason, and you just go with it no matter what.
Yeah, man. I remember the big thing and the big conflict for you in terms of trying to, finding the true reason. You talk about finding the true reason. You went through the process of okay, I feel like I need to go back in. I feel like I need to get back into, the Navy to at least just be a part of the community, to pass on the things that I've learned on the civilian side, the medical side, and then at least pass that knowledge on somewhat, if you can, to some degree, on the Navy. But you're not only doing that because you did that. You joined back. But in joining back, you found out that, oh, I've got to go out to California. But in going out to California, you're like, oh, I have to change schools. And in changing schools, you had to go through a whole process in itself. And where's that led you, man?
Yeah, so I rejoined the Navy, and I ended up getting orders to California. And what's been really great is having to readapt to a complete new environment, right? You have everything set in stone in one place, and the next moment it's all changed. But what's been really good about it is is it's led me to a really great school system and a different perspectives and a different state. Taking classes I never thought I'd be taking, like taking a bio-calc based physics class. Like, dude, I didn't even know things like this exist, or taking taking organic chemistry too with like world-renowned professors. You're like, oh my God, like it's just tough. But it's so great because knowledge is power, and being able to think through problems is like the most important thing, right? We all, if I don't understand something, it's really great to have other peers there that are willing to help you out. And I think like that's the importance of being able to socialize and make new friends and make connections and work with others, regardless of where you're at, will help benefit you like in any way.
And you know what's so cool, man, and I see this thematically, and I say this kind of, I guess this is going to kind of sound off color. Maybe it's just because I'm not exposed to individuals that are part of what we'll say is like, regular like Marine Corps or regular like Navy. I'm more exposed to people in like our community. And maybe that's a lack on my part. But when it comes to like observing individuals who truly like, when they come to the civilian side, they don't just pursue like existing. They pursue to exist to build others up. I've seen that thematically, and actually that kind of shows in what you're doing, because a lot of our conversations that we've had in passing since you've moved, over there to California, is even on the Navy side, we had discussions about you meeting up with some recent BRC graduates and then imparting some crazy knowledge on them, but not only that, but even on the civilian side in regard to the people that you have at college, like you're teaching them. It's like, hey, you're having this issue, okay, great. Let me help you out with that.
Yeah. So like what's been super great is like, you go and you're able to spread things you've learned and your experiences, and it's not just, BS. It's like real hardcore knowledge and life experiences. And yeah, like it's really great to sit down with other corpsmen from, different units, that we've worked with, and then ones we haven't, and you're able to sit there and be like, hey man, like do things like this, I already know what you're trying to get to. Hey man, just do this really quick, and you can do quick teaching moments. And what's really great is you get to show people like, oh, like this is a path you want to pursue. Like, well, then this is what it looks like when you get there, like the abilities you would have, like if I'm sitting here and I'm just a junior little guy, and it's like, oh, I want to be an 18 Delta or whatever it is. Like I'm not, but it's like great because they, I've gone through so much training that they can see like, oh, like that's what it would look like if you did that, and so giving people that idea and visual image for them to see themselves where they could be and the abilities they would have to do is probably like the most important impact. Just making impacts on people's lives is like the most important. Like no matter what you're doing or where you're at, like trying to have an impact and a positive influence on those around you is like the most important thing like you could ever do as a human.
Well, Robert Johnson, it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you, man. Do you have any last words that you would like to say? And if you do, just look at the camera right there and tell the people, just make sure your mouth is facing the microphone, okay?
So I think like for anyone out there that is in college and you're going through these academic like tough courses, like just always remember that we're all students, we're all learning, all teachers are different, and all of them are designing courses in a way that they think is the best way for you to learn. And just remember, like if your mindset doesn't line up with that, don't feel upset about that, like understand where they're coming from and try to learn in regard, right? Because it's like, oh, if I learn this way and I know I can attack a certain objective this way, like don't be afraid to look at it from attacking the objective from another angle, and some of the teachers try to do that, and you're like, why are we doing this? And it's like, because if I told you to go through the front door, that'd be too easy. It's just too linear mindset, right? But if I tell you to go and look at it, go and learning a objective in a different perspective, it makes you understand like how more complex you can get in your way of thinking to think your way through different challenges and obstacles. So don't ever be afraid, and don't ever try to challenge, but try to accept and see where they're coming from, and you can always, figure it out.
Heck yeah, man. Well, thanks for the talk, bud. Finish your coffee, and I say let's go find something else fun to do.
Yeah, man, it was great. I think it's just it's great to be home, but
Cheers, bud.
Yeah, dude, later.